Hi, I found this Bluetooth speaker in Ikea. It's called Kallsup. Its design is simple, one speaker and two buttons. The design is minimal and simple, and this is totally fine. I'm doing this model because I wanted to make something creative and decorate my space with something more personal. Luckily for me, I'm a 3D artist, and it happens that I own a 3D printer. This is more like a breakdown, so I will be commenting what I'm doing. I'm using a mirror modifier. In the overlay edit menu, I enable the edge length so I can see the measures and be more precise. To make the work easier, I create the boundaries so I don't have to worry about radius or diameters. With Ctrl-Shift-P, I bevel the vertex and then clamp so I can have a perfect circle. I also left the screen key so you can follow along what I'm pressing. The size of the model here is 70 cm, you can see it in the viewport, but of course in real life it's 7 cm. I use this because it's much easier to work with the zoom and the scale in the viewport. Later I will just scale it 10 times, and you can work like this, it's totally not a problem if you keep the proportions right. This is the part that I call the concept blockout. I have an idea of what I want to do, but at this stage it's vivid like a forgotten dream. What I'm doing here is what a 2D artist would do, so some concept artwork. And I'm doing the same thing but in 3D. I'm not forcing anything, I'm just exploring. I want to have the main body that will hold the speaker, the base and the legs. The aesthetic that I'm trying to follow is kinda like a sci-fi vibe with some cassette futurism and some maybe spaceships elements. Later the design changes a little bit, but this is just the starting point. I just asked myself this question: what if it's a robot that can follow you around? That felt like a companion, maybe a dog, maybe a spider, but at the same time kinda something cute. At this stage, I was also trying to think about function, like how it would work, so I had to scrape some legs idea. Finally, I kinda leaned towards this 4-leg design. Just to give you a perspective of time, this concept took me about 30 minutes. After the blockout, I started creating the model. I began with the beveling, and I create the panels. I will be using the Bull tool, it's an internal add-on for Blender, to create all the holes and cuts. Using the cylinder, I'm doing the front speaker hole. The back port is done in the same way. Later, I will be changing that a little bit because I don't like the way it turned out. I carved the space for the speaker, keeping more or less 1.5 millimeters from each side of the wall. With the settings I'm using for the 3D printer, it's kinda good enough, taking into account that the curing process with the UV light will be shrinking the resin a little bit. Now it's time for the legs. Some parts are changed later because I'm still experimenting stuff. I also dropped the L-shaped leg to a more straight face to simplify the painting later. While I'm building the mesh, I'm trying to keep in mind that later I will have to clean, sand and also paint the mesh, so I'm trying to make my life easier. With the Bull tool, I'm trying to create an interesting shape. Instead of trying to model that with a great topology, I prefer to use the Bull tool and later in case I can fix it. Also because this will be a 3D printed model, so I'm not really concerned about topology. For the side panel I wanted to have this kinda cushion pillow effect, and I just went with sculpting. I started with a simple plane, then I subdivided and I used the vertex group to mask some parts. And then I used the mask to create these face sets that are really helpful for sculpting. Here I inflate the faces and then I proceed to sculpt the creases. This is a 4x4 grid, later I will ditch it to a 3x3. Considering the size of the print, about 7 centimeters, I thought it would have been better to keep like a bigger square shape. Since I'll have a cover on top, I just wanted to have some buttons to press, so I created these knobs. Later I will create the Bluetooth and the play icon to put on top. I polished the legs a little bit more, breaking the shapes to make them interesting and adding these heels. Since the top part is separated, I thought of adding a small panel to close the back and the top to keep it in place. To hold it in place, I went with magnets. These small cylinders are about 3 mm, and I have these kind of magnets, I think they are neodymium, that I use in my 3D print. They're not really powerful, but they do the job. This is the joint that was changed. I had to think something to make it stronger, because it needs to hold the weight of the speaker. After parenting everything, I aligned the legs. I use a plane to make the feet touch the floor, so when the model is printed, it's already in place, and I know it will hold the shape. Finally, I did a quick texture test and UV the model to have a direction. I ended up not painting exactly the same way, and you will see that later, because it was too much work and I just wanted to simplify the model. The whole thing took about 1 hour and 30 minutes. In this part I'm starting to clean all the 3D printed resin. This is of course after the UV curing. I don't have much to say in all these parts because I'm not really that good with this, so I don't know if I have something to teach, to be honest, but I will be still describing what I'm doing. Here you can see on the base that I made different holes, and the reason is because I didn't want to have a filled piece of 3D printed resin, because firstly it will be really difficult to kinda cure it, and second it's because it will be really heavy. On the main body there are some white lines. I think something went wrong during the printing. I guess I did not align properly the model to the plate. Maybe the supports were not enough. It's fixable with some sanding, so I kept the model. I'm using a 180 grit sandpaper to remove the supports left over. I will be using a high grit to polish the surface and remove the lines of the print. Before the paint, I'm applying the primer. I'm doing this because the paint sticks better to the surface. It's really easy to apply it to the surface with the brush. Even if I decide not to paint the model, it leaves a really nice finish on the surface. For the main body, I'm using white acrylic paint. These are not specific for airbrush painting, but they kinda work. Of course, I need to thin the paint, and I'm using a Vallejo thinner. This acrylic paint is fine, not really great compared to the specific airbrush paint, but it works. I have to give about 2-3 layers to have a nice coverage. It is cheap and you actually can see that from the pigment density. But to be fair, I had to thin the paint a lot to work with the airbrush I'm using. Later you will see I will be using a specific paint and it will be working really well. Here you can see there is a little bit of color. I used the brush with the speed paint from Army Painter. I never used this paint with the brush, so the job is really poorly done. But the moment I used the same paint with the airbrush, it turned really well. I didn't have to thin it, with just one layer it covers the model. Previously I masked the model in some parts, but it turned out a poor job as well, cause some paint hit the wrong parts of the model. I ended up doing a more aggressive job with the taping. I'm using a simple paper tape, the one that you use when you paint walls. But to avoid removing some paint, I took the tape and stick it 3-4 times on the palm of my hand to reduce the adhesion. This part on the leg took me a little bit of time, therefore I decided to change a bit the painting design to make it easier. Here I'm mixing two colors, a yellow and a dark red. To have this orange color, the ratio is about 50:1 drops. So this is the model, it was painted and glued. I think the design turned out really nicely. The circle holes are there to empty the model. The square one are the joints to lock the model. These are some magnets to attach the top part. This is the top part and I'm really happy how this turned out. The magnets are also on the bottom. Here on the back you can see the hole for the charging port. To finish, these are the knobs on top. They are sealed but free to move and they will be pressing the buttons. I left the hole in the middle so I can see the light when it's on. This is the small piece with the magnet that will be holding the top to the base. The top part is not perfectly sealed, I know. I will be doing some adjustments with the design. Unfortunately, the blue part fell on the floor and broke. That was expected to happen because I used the water resin and it's really good for prototyping, but it's not really resistant or robust to falls. I recently bought a new version, it's called Water Washable Resin 3.0 and it's really robust, so I really can't wait to test that. If you have feedback or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you.